questions we're asking is, how do the authorities, they're the ones in charge, restore a sense of safety and trust in communities that feel abandoned in the face of such a violence? Stellenbosch University's Dr. Guy Lamb joins us now to share more. Guy, good morning. Thanks for being with us. You're somebody that has researched the space. You've got ideas about what's been working, what doesn't work, and we'll talk about some of the interventions that have been laid on in the last few days or so to stem the blood flow. But when you see these stories, when you see again this morning a 3-month-old baby also shot dead, and we've seen and reported on a spate of killings, mass killings recently. I mean, what does an expert like you think?
Well, it's of course deeply concerning and also quite frustrating, because this is not something new. It's something that's been happening for decades. We've seen a major acceleration in this type of violence since about 2011. I mean, the authorities have thrown quite a lot of resources into it, largely from a kind of policing point of view. But we still, I mean, if we look at what's happening in the Western Cape from the murder point of view, the rate increased quite significantly since 2020. It's kind of came down more recently, but it's still at elevated levels. And the Western Cape has the second highest murder rate of all provinces. So it is very frustrating. We're not really getting anywhere with this, and we do need to be, making some quite serious decisions about moving forward, particularly around the issue of firearms.
If you go back to the numbers, and as you say, this is a historic issue, as many of our problems are. Cape Town, between 90 and 130 gangs, over 100,000 members. Is this still a policing issue, Guy, or is it just a failure of governance and urban planning? I am cognizant of what you say, that a lot of resources have been thrown in, and the conversation around devolution of police to be more effective in how this is managed is there, and I want to put that in the margin very firmly. But how do we still have such a high number of gangs and gang members over such a long period who are just able to basically hold communities hostage?
Well, I mean, the gang issue, we've had it for even more than decades. We've had it for centuries. I mean, the gangs exist for a variety of reasons, often for protection, but often it's about income generation. And gangs are not specific to the Western Cape. We have them actually in all provinces. There's a lot of focus on the Western Cape. I mean, the key problem in the Western Cape is, a lot of the gang interactions and competition are highly violent. And that's why we kind of seeing the murder rates that are happening. When it comes to addressing gangs, it's this issue of, well, are they a problem? Aren't they a problem? And in some areas, they're not necessarily such a problem. But in areas where they hold communities to ransom, where they are essentially providing law and order and governance, and the state doesn't have much involvement, clearly that is an issue. So, I mean, you can't just deal with it from a policing point of view, really just trying to keep the lid on something, and the lid keeps boiling over. And so in this kind of context, it's very much about dealing with the kind of socioeconomic aspects of it. It's about dealing with issues around very high levels of unemployment, especially amongst young men. Not many opportunities for them in these kind of spaces. Often these young men coming from kind of very difficult, dysfunctional family situations, they're dropping out of school, and gangs provide the protection, they provide access to resources, they provide status, and so, they're not going anywhere. We really have to, this is all kind of comes out of poverty, inequality, and we really need to be addressing those issues in the long term if we want to deal with gang violence.
Guy, when you say those sociological issues are the ones we're primarily facing here, then are we doing our anti-gang strategies incorrectly, where we're actually chasing more the symptoms while ignoring this, the systemic roots of it, which, as you say, is those sociological and psychological issues?
Yeah, I mean, the anti-gang units and the anti-gang strategy, it is problematic in some senses, because it's about just trying to eliminate gangs and gangsters, and which is not really possible in the South African context. But ultimately what they're trying to do is to stabilize. And the idea is you can't really do any of this poverty alleviation, job creation, investment in areas where there's very high levels of crime happening. So the whole point of the anti-gang unit really is to bring about greater stabilization, reduce the violence that's taking place, so these kind of other interventions can happen. But the problem is the other interventions are not happening at scale. So we have actually really good strategies to sort of, that complements the anti-gang strategy. We have the integrated crime and violence prevention strategy, which deals with all these societal issues, but not being adequately implemented at the moment. At the Western Cape, level, we've got the safety plan. The first safety plan's finished, and new safety plans coming into being, which is looking to address many of these issues. But the resources there are not significant enough. I mean, it really needs to be provincial and national together to address these issues. So there's good ideas that are out there, really good strategies that are out there, but they're not properly resourced and not being adequately implemented.
Yeah, and you speak about the resources. We just need that globally, right? And it feels that way because the SAPS narcotics drug in the Western Cape, there's only one of those. How can law enforcement then do this job correctly if not properly implemented, if not properly resourced at this stage? Is this something that now needs to be claimed as an emergency in order to get anything done?
Well, I think so. I mean, we have this ongoing problem, and it's been highly politicized around kind of policing resources. I mean, we have a significant number of police resources. It's more in the way in which we use them. The police minister has been suspended, and Ntunu started a process of better cooperation between national, provincial, and cities. And the Western Cape has been the kind of first place that's happened. Those systems have been put into place, but it's very slow off the starting blocks in terms of implementing stuff. And so, it's more around how do we do things more effectively, more strategically, but really kind of taking a sort of a longer view on these issues too, and sort of saying, how do we pull other parts of government in to focus on violence prevention? And that's not really happening at the moment. Again, government departments do their own thing, and there's very little coordination happening.
It's the coordination, I think, that's so important, Guy, to make sure that we can optimize the work that everyone is doing, and the pressure can be put on the right spots. But as we've known, and as you've said, not only now but before, gangs and gang activity on the Cape Flats is a deeply entrenched practice. You've got networks built around drugs, around guns, even links to corrupt officials. How do you dismantle such powerful ecosystems without just creating a vacuum that new gangs fill in? And I wonder if you can share with us and draw some parallels to international best practice when we think about lessons we could learn all the way from Latin America to the US.
I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, we have, gang issues and gang violence all over the place. And as I say, kind of gangs are not going anywhere. They're kind of part of many societies. I mean, ultimately, we need to be working towards how do we reduce violence in the context of gangs, and how do, societies and economies, how do we create kind of opportunities for kind of gangs, which actually often involve kind of business structures for them to become more legitimate for. Because, I mean, most kind of citizens within South Africa, would far rather be doing legitimate forms of business, legal forms of business, than illegal forms of business. But often those opportunities aren't there. So it's really about how do you open the economy for these kind of structures, and how do you decriminalize elements of that economy where, gangs thrive. So I mean, the whole issue around the kind of drug trade, we've made some small moves there, particularly around marijuana dacha in terms of decriminalizing that. But there are many other aspects of the drug trade which, we tend to criminalize. And of course, this creates massive opportunities for gangs involved in the drug trade to get involved. But also it's about, we have challenges around our ports. So part of the issues that lead to gang violence is, large quantities of products coming in largely from South America, Central America, and that then kind of emboldens gangs. And they kind of part of these kind of distribution networks, and it largely has to do with kind of weaknesses within our kind of border control. If we kind of deal with those sort of issues and kind of restrict the product coming in, then that can have kind of consequences downstream. But I mean, a big issue we have is that, gangs just seem to have, quite extensive access to firearms, and firearms really do make gang violence and the sort of violence in communities where gangs operate, extensively, astronomical. And that's where we start to see drive-by shootings, that we start to see innocent people getting killed because gangs are fighting it out over control of drug turf and extortion networks and other related illegal activities.
What does the devolution of policing powers, though, do to this conversation? Because that's the conversation being had now, particularly by the Democratic Alliance, wanting that and investigative powers for municipal police. Would that change anything? Would that help?
I mean, it's really around, to what degree those devolution of powers then are, kind of contribute to kind of much more focused, coordinated policing. Because this is very much around kind of provincial and city governments wanting to demonstrate that they can do a good job when it comes to law enforcement, because it's such a key issue when it comes to elections. It will only make a difference if if those powers, those provinces and cities who have those devolved policing powers try something different, try something new that actually stands a better chance of reducing the violence. Otherwise, you're just really kind of spreading your resources thinner. You're kind of having different, centers of decision making, and you have institutional competition, and nothing changes. So it's very much around if that devolution actually leads to kind of more focused, more evidence-based interventions that encourages cooperation between the different kind of centers of power, that we all see something. Otherwise, we're just going to be spreading our resources even thinner.
Dr. Guy Lamb, thank you for talking to us this morning. I know I said that with a bit of a sigh, but one can, relate, I suppose, to the burden that we feel, all of us as South Africans, when we think about communities in those areas, especially the hotspot ones like Steenberg, Muizenberg, Grassy Park and Lavender Hill. The lockdowns there bringing some temporary calm, but residents are wondering what's going to happen when the police pull out and it's a return to business as usual.